Kia ora tātou katoa, nau mai whakatata mai ki tēnei te wāhi kōrero, te Māori Conversations, tēnā koutou. Hoi nā koutou mā. So tonight I have a friend and a colleague. It's joining us tonight, Rob Mokaraka. Tēnā rā hoki koe, Rob, nau mai haere mai rā. And Heemi Kapa-Kingi, who's also joining us. He's also our tech guy. So he'll be our tech guy, and then he'll be part of our kōrero, wāhi kōrero. Anō reira, tēnā koutua. So Rob, you and I, we've done some work together over the last while, and it's just thank you really for coming to share and your thoughts, your journey, and your kaupapa, shot bro. You won't be surprised. Mental health, suicide prevention is one of the key things that I'm standing for in Te Tai Tokerau for the Tai Tokerau candidacy. So and this is, you and I have had many conversations about the kaupapa, so tēnā rā hoki koe. I just want to open up with that question then, Rob. Just your kaupapa, your journey, and then your art and how you've combined those powers, really. So please, kōrero mai koe.
Kia ora, Mariameno. Thank you for holding this this platform for us to mihi to. And so what happened to me is I had a mental and spiritual breakdown in 2009 in Point Chevalier, Auckland, where I provoked the police to shoot me dead because I had unresolved trauma spewing up a wairua, a hinengaro, and what I call the storm of suicidal ideation. So I was triggered by an emotional breakup with a wahine. It was unhealthy anyway. But what happened was it came spewing up, and I wasn't worth it. I was the lowest piece of whatever that ever lived. And I called the police, and I provoked the police to shoot me dead because I was in a rage. And as you know, anger is fear, fear is anger. And I scared the police so much, acting so irate and angry, that they shot me in the chest around about here at close range with a Glock 9mm bullet. Now I am blessed to be alive, and thanks to whānau and friends and a lot of therapy and a lot of aroha, I created this seminar/theatre show, which is a tool for healing called Shot Bro, Confessions of a Depressed Bullet.
Rob, when I hear you, when I'm listening to you again right now, it takes me back to the first night when you on and the theatre in Whangarei that night across the road from our office, that morning together, and then tautoko, and I just from that point to now, you've stuck with the kaupapa, you have continued to show love, grace, and ongoing stickability to the things that you have driven and behind the take for you. Can you just share a little bit about what were the drivers? What are the key drivers that have come out of your work and your journey now that you've put on stage?
The key drivers is the mea nui is I want to save a life. And I've got the right language and the right wairua to tap on that door where people are afraid to acknowledge it. And so by having acknowledgement in a space that is safe, whānau and communities go, he does know, and he's made this so safe that I feel compelled to share part of my story, because there's a weight on everyone's shoulders, this korowai of shame. And it can be from varying degrees of whatever the mamai is. But the mea nui is we need a safe space to be able to articulate this without judgment. And that's what Shot Bro is doing. It's doing that for me. As I'm sharing, I'm learning. It's like a living wānanga. I get to kōrero with communities, psychiatrists, psychologists, tohunga, Māori healers, the broad spectrum of rongoa.
Ka pai, Rob. I'm back there in that room again, and it it's such a great opportunity, perversely, in when we're talking about something which is the type of loss and devastation that can cause for many, many of our whānau. And certainly you and I recall that back in 2012. So Heemi, can I just kōrero kia koe, pata atu kia koe. Back in 2012, you and a number of your peers responded and designed from a particular idea. Can you share a little bit about that? And behind that then, what were the drivers for you and your reanga at that time?
Well, kia ora tātou, me ana kia tātou ko whai wahi mai, tēnei kupapa, o te rā kia koe Rob, me o tini kōrero ko puta mai, ngāmi kia koe e kara. So just to answer that question in regards to, I guess, the response that was initiated by a series of suicides that occurred within Northland or within Whangarei. Yes, a group of peers, myself, had come together to create a kaupapa to, I guess, support rangatai within Whangarei who were experiencing suicide ideation, who were experiencing depression through the ages of adolescence. And as the leaders or as the designers of that kaupapa, we were, in fact, young people trying to help young people. And I think the greatest power or the greatest success of that kaupapa was the fact that it was the demographic was helping itself. It wasn't typically like with older, pale, stale, male psychiatrists trying to help this ropu. It was young, brown, educated, and loving Māori from Te Tautokoro trying to support their whānau, their school friends through a very tough time of development and I guess trying to find their own identity. So yeah, I guess the greatest success or the driving force for that kaupapa was that it was for rangatahi by rangatahi, which isn't something new, I think, in terms of concept or in terms of principle. It's just like when the government empowers or gives the reins over to Māori to support Māori, there's massive successes within that. So the same principle, but just with a younger generation supporting itself. So yeah, that'd be my interpretation of that kaupapa at that time.
Kia ora, Heemi. Rob, so back to you. Just you would have been picking up a little bit and you're responding to what Heemi's saying. So you continuing to do that work in your own particular way. Where do you? So that's been 8 years or more, Rob. You know, with this more for you. Where do you? Where? Not where to next, but you've. You know, you were saying just tonight you had Adelaide, you're talking to somebody in Adelaide and they're reaching out to you because you've got a particular way of understanding and messaging really out. Can you just talk a little bit more about that and where do you see moving forward you'd want to persist with Shotbro, the kaupapa?
Global, and it's more of a movement because what is Shopper is go straight to the ngākau and it has aroha on tap, but it's presenting yourself in a vulnerable way that is safe. So not vulnerable as in unsafe and all over the place. It's just saying, hey, this fella, he's done a lot of mahi on himself. He can walk the talk. He's been through to Te Pō, come out the other side to Te Ao Marama. And they go, well, this guy is pono, and I will listen to him. That's why I'm getting invited into maximum security prisons. I'm getting invited into military bases because I can hold that space. I can hold that space, and I can hold that wānanga space, as we discussed earlier, that they can't fire me, nor can they demote me on my answers, because my answers will be tika pono and still have aroha, but it will just be firm. Because you don't need systems or protocols to show compassion. There's some sort of confusion. We've got to look at the manual to show some compassion. You don't need that. That needs to be imbued from the top all the way down to the floor.
And now, you know, when we talk about policy, we were just reflecting on it and being been critical about how policy developed, and under our own Māori Party method, I guess, is using. So we start with oranga whenua, oranga tangata, right? Oranga mana, oranga tangata. So so practice or philosophy or whakatauki are the basis of what we're designing, where we start from when we're thinking about all kinds of remedies, and not just remedy, but revolution. How do we talk about remedies to revolutionize, so that we're not, and often we can be caught in that space where we're talking about where things are a bit had it. And, and it's as if we can't raise our head to think about and plan for how we inspire and reset and rebel and revolt for our future. So I get excited about that in our new team, because the way in which we even think about policy, we don't think about it in the usual mediocre, really, and dysfunctional way. We think about it in a very, very different way. So the starting place is critical. And when I'm listening to you, that's what excites me about it. And it's that kind of feed into policy. And we've just really got to find a whole other way to even talk about policy. But so Heemi, just to you, can you just talk a little bit more? So going forward, what works for, I know, ko pake ke haere koe, so haere te rangatahi ke koe, but still, moved on a little bit more. What's, how should we listen to rangatahi in this way, in this space, to becoming well, be well, and set the future?
I guess one thing that is agreed for the rangatahi generation is that what works today may not work tomorrow, and that's because of the dynamics that sit within the rangatahi world. Like it's trend that come up within the rangatahi world can change daily. And so too can the demand or the resources or the responses that sit around them. And typically, like bureaucracies struggle to change quickly. So I guess that's probably one of the reasons why in the past kaupapa that once worked haven't shown as much success later on, because rangatahi have kind of moved on to a new kaupapa or to a new way of living and thinking. So I think the only way we can ensure success for the coming generations is to make sure that the foundations are safe and secure. So things such as that Rob has shared, tika, pono, aroha, those things as the foundation. But the way that those are expressed have to be adaptable and they have to be dynamic, because that's the way rangatahi move. It's quick, it's fast, it's instantaneous. So the way in which we deliver, the way in which we approach them has to be just as dynamic. And I think that's even beyond just that generation. I think as humans, we adapt and we change with the world. So why not, or why? So the kaupapa or the solutions should also change as well over time. But on a foundational level, there's constants that are universal for all people. So yeah, that'd be my thoughts.
Sometimes I think, and as we're marching towards the result on the 19th of September, I think really if we do what we're doing now really, really well and without compromise, then the future will look after itself. Because we're here. Like I'm nowhere else. I'm just right here in the present right now. And if I do my greatest and best present, then the future, which is in your hands, Heemi, and many other rangatahi, then you will look after, the future will look after itself. Here, Rob, how's in terms of seeing into, I don't know about into a future and future for you and this kaupapa and what you have designed, which I think is life-changing, really, and life-saving.
Oh, kia ora, Mariameno. We are being the change we want to see. You can talk about it till the cows come home, but you have to put it into action. And so that's what we're all doing. We're actioning in the space. So there's less hui, more doing, or less waha, more kaha, whatever you want to, however you want to look at it. But it's an action, and we're doing that. And just going back to the policy side, I feel like we need to decolonize these spaces and find an adequate treaty partner that will allow us for it to be Māori-led, but a collaboration, but Māori-led, because that time has passed where we're being dictated to by someone who is disconnected to our culture and looking from the outside. So for me to be invited onto military bases, for me to get invited to maximum security prisons means that they're acknowledging without words that their systems are obsolete. To get someone like me is coming from left field and slicing through all those archaic systems with tika, pono, and aroha. So providing that space, not just for the staff, but for the people in charge, for the rangatira in charge of these certain organizations to reflect on self and go, oh, heck, I thought I was doing my best. Apparently I could do better. And it doesn't mean we're inadequate. It just means we need to upgrade.
100%.
I think I just, what did I write here? What you've been able to do is all of that without a single policy in sight.
Phew.
That's like, yeah, exactly. So, how radical are we prepared to get to reset and prepare for the revolution of the same? And I don't think it's in the minds of people my age alone, obviously, and thank goodness, really. And it does take Marianga and others to know and accept the fact that when particularly the whole digital vibe of it all of that, and what you're doing is there's 1,000 other ways to do this. Actually, the fact that we don't know about it is more indicative of what we don't know. And so then there's another level of courage which we have to be prepared to go to that says, and even courage to say, I don't know. I don't know. And be okay that at a certain age you don't know. The world is changing so fast all the time. Yeah. So Heemi, kei a koe, hea hau whakaro ki tēnā? Ngā mea katoa, ngā kōrero katoa.
Yeah, I think, typically there always a tendency to try and create a policy, a program, a project of some sort with massive amounts of funding to try and support whānau that are in need, but then lack the culture or the whānau to create it. So then it ends up just being redundant anyway. And that's the power, I think, with what Rob's done is just it's a very real, genuine experience that whānau can see themselves in, or they can see their tamaiti and they can see their fathers and they can see whoever that they identify with in those situations and immediately connect with it without having to come up with the connection. It's immediate. And that's, I think, also a power within the performing arts, because there's such a vulnerability attached to acting, to theatre, to kapaka, to dance, where people have to openly share their most deepest emotions to a crowd, and that quality of humanities is one of the most powerful things that people can identify and say, like, yes, I see their pain, yes, I see their joy. And I see myself within that. So that's one of the things that I've always appreciated through kaupapa such as this with Rob's mahi, whether that be within dance as well. With my background, it's just its ability to communicate all those things without having to worry about the facade of society or the way we have to typically hide those emotions. We're just openly beautiful, openly human, and all that we are. And I think that's a real power within performing arts that policy doesn't have, because I guess policy is it's theory based, it's words based, there's no emotion within it. But if you take all of that away and you just look at the fact that I'm hurt, I'm sad, I feel pain, that's the stuff that people connect with and people appreciate. So that's my title for that one.
Mm. So, Rob, imagine you at a policy table influencing the policy. You know what I mean? So you've got, that whole idea of policy table should have poets at it. And I don't mean to sound flaky, because I can say, we're like, oh, God, what are you talking about? But imagine if you had that dynamic, that what Heemi's just talked about, the quality of that, because you certainly aren't going to get it in a policy. What you're going to get is typical bureaucracy, typical dry, just detached language, which has got zero. I think the policy makers, and some of my best friends are policy makers, she says, giggling, but imagine that dynamic of policy that strikes to the heart with the tools that you're talking about. It would be quite a rare thing. Can you imagine? So you've got lineup, if you had a politician and you had a poet and you had had all those, that type of mind producing policy. Talk to us about that. What do you think about that?
I think, yes, I think you're in the, and let's say there's a pot, right? And we're putting all the elements in there to get some nutritious kai for our people. Chuck people with lived experience in there, who are healing, not just any lived experience. There has to be, there has to be a healing journey and process. And so therefore you can talk to the heart, because I'm engaging with communities of different ethnicities at grassroots level. They just speak straight to the guts, because there's no mucking around, because they've lost the cousin, the whānau, the uncle, the auntie, and they're speaking from that directly. And you can feel that in the room, and you can't refute the polo. And sure, you can midi it to make it fit to be a solution. So it's great to have, not great, but you can come with your problems, but come with solutions as well.
Just pre-COVID, Rob, we had a horrid result in Taitokero, right, just before. So, and we were working with whānau in a particular area, but the area is tiny. It's like one road going in, like tiny road, and a high number of whānau that had died by suicide. And that was their COVID right then and there. And the all of the trauma that came with all of that, and I mean years intergenerational, pre-COVID or their COVID. They weren't anticipating death. They were catching it right before. So our work and our efforts, I have to get amongst that, understand it, know it, and drive through that whole policy development, because I'm not feeling that currently. Well, obviously it's not. It's not showing through in policy. It's not coming through the agencies that are set up to respond. They're just not at all. Particularly our mental health agencies, which again, some of our whanaunga work in there, holding it and trying to make it happen, but it's not happening. Heemi,
jump in there. Just for the pre-COVID thing, whānau Māori were already living in poverty prior to COVID, and then, if anything, COVID, the lockdown period, just exacerbated those symptoms for them through losing their house, losing their job. Those things just made that situation a lot worse for them, and then of course exacerbates all those socio-cultural factors or risk factors for suicide within those whānau. And then just to go back to just to touch on your point about agencies and their, I guess, policies or kaupapa, is typically what government does is when the budget's announced or budget is announced, there's a tendency for two types of behaviors to come out. So if a kaupapa is going well and it's showing some type of reduction within suicide prevention, the government puts in more money. But at the same time, if these same kaupapa, these same programs aren't showing a reduction in suicide prevention, the government does the same thing and puts more money into it, thinking, okay, sweet, it's a finance resource issue, so we just want to put more money into it to make it work. But in most situations, agencies and health providers alike, the thing that they lack is actually evaluation. So they're never working a way, or they never specify their objectives, or they never have objectives that say like, hey, sweet, this is the number we're looking for. These are the whānau we're looking to hit, which means they never really know if what they're doing is working. And so what happens is money just keeps going around or back into the same kaupapa. And then on this side, we have kaupapa such as whānau ora or whānau ora health providers who aren't getting anything, but they're showing efficacy, effectiveness, and a genuine connection with tiwi Māori. And that's the reality that I think mental health and suicide prevention is, I guess, practiced within Aotearoa. Like, the government will just keep putting money into itself to try and either make it work or because it's working. But on the other side, we have kaupapa that Rob runs. You know, that if we were able to expand that and to grow that to we shared globally, there'd be a massive impact for all whānau.
Exactly. Rob.
Oh, bro, I just agreeing with everything you're saying. I've seen it, I've heard it, I've felt it.
Yeah.
There is no wairua, there's no aroha in any of the policies. Hence, we need to decolonize the way that we hop into that, to pull it apart, to start again. The best way I've heard it, my friend said, in the music industry said, I've watched the mental health system from afar. Looks like the floorboards are rotten and you're chucking millions of dollars on new liner and carpet, but the foundation's still rotten. I went, oh, kia ora. Very insightful, very insightful. And it doesn't mean that people have got bad intentions. It's just that everything needs to either be thrown out and started once again, started fresh. And with our people in particular, we're looking for accessibility and cultural competency to be understood as a Māori, as a human being. Everything needs to be humanized, because I'm hearing some very terrible stories at ground level of mental health, people with suicidal tendencies going into mental health units or emergency A&E and just treated terribly. And yes, they've been treated by staff members like that, but at the same time, the system is perpetuating this behavior.
100%, bro. 100%.
I fear that, and really it shows up in funny little ways, but it always, when I see it, like talking about objectives, Heemi, and sort of how a policy starts with that, which is interesting. So even just from a Pākehā reo perspective, to objectify, you couldn't get further away from the human experience when you objectify. You see, so when you're collecting, because objectives there's such a popular way. It's popular because it's not about the subjective part of people, and really, but that's where you want to nail. That's where you want to reach, and that's where the change will occur. So when they talk about objectives and naming them and goals, and again, you run up that very clinical, and I think so far away from people, it's never going to work for any human being, let alone a Māori being. So when we talk about cultural competency, as a party, we're talking about cultural ownership. We're talking about taking it back and resetting and reclaiming and just redesigning it all for Māori beings, so that at least when we live and when we're born and we live and we die, all of that is experienced as a Māori.
Yeah,
right.
And I think there should be a relationship between the two, or at least the ownership of what an objective goal is for tiwi Māori. It's not defined by clinicians in a sense, but defined for Māori by Māori, to understand, like, okay, sweet, this is our pai tawhiti, this is our pai tata, and this is how we're going to move from point A to point B. And keeping that very human, very genuine sense of Māoriness within it as well. I think that's very important.
Yeah, kia ora, Heemi. So we are just about at the end of our kōrero, and So I just want to hand some just a moment just to both of you to how you want to sum up. It's kei a koutou. Rob, kei a koe te tuatahi.
Because people are watching this, I just want to say to our brothers, our sisters, our kaumātua, our friends, you're worth it. You are goddamn worth it. And I don't care what the voice says or doubt says. You are loved. Please don't take your life. And I always tell every community, crying is better than dying, especially for our tāne. They think it's the opposite. And we have to unpack all of this, decolonize this to get to the ngākau. And that is aroha. And everybody deserves it as much as they need, as often as they need. Help.
Kia ora, bro. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe, Rob. Tēnā koe. Beautiful. Thank you. Everyone heard you in that kōrero. Heemi, I might just, if you can, you final words to you, and then just to close us up. But from me, I just want to say to everybody and to our guests, big love to you both, big love to everyone watching, listening and tuning into Māori Conversations tonight. Kei a koe, Heemi, kia kapita tātou nei koe.
Osi, kia ora tātou. Ka tika me mea tu kia koe, Rob. Me te wānanga kopata mai I tēnei pō, te pai hoki o ngā kōrero, hei aki, hei poipoia, I te whānau, I te iwi Māori, nō re ngāmihi kia koe e kara, o tira, hei whakakapi I tēnei hui, I tēnei wānanga, kei noi tātou. Wairea te rangi e tū nei, wairea te papa e takuto nei, wairea te tapu o te wānea, kia tau ai te rangi Māori, kia tūturu whiti whakamaua, kia tīna.
Tīna.
Haumi e hui e tāi ki.
Tāi ki.